I don't want to say groundbreaking, but it was interesting with the International Olympic Committee, who always seems to be in some trouble or have themselves. It's between them and FIFA. They're always in some hot water. IOC or FIFA.
They're always making news.
Yeah, they're always making news. So they made news early this month. This is 7 months, obviously, before the Summer Games in Tokyo. The IOC President Thomas Bach announced that athletes who protest during the games would be punished and could even be sent home. I found this quite interesting in terms of the timing.
You know what I want to happen then, right?
What you
all of the best American athletes just start protesting.
That would be great, but
let's see if you send everybody home. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that would be great, but do I think everybody's going to do that?
No.
No, because they're probably scared of the endorsements and possibilities they could lose. So I think that's all that. I find it interesting that this happens. Timing is always interesting, right? 7 months before the Summer Games, we're coming off the heels of a lot of talk in the NFL around Colin Kaepernick and players who have made protest, and we're in a very we're always in politically charged times, but it's
all
very
the teams still have that workout
year,
footage, by the way.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
We don't know where
nobody's talked about.
We don't
that.
know what like what's
and
coming
nobody asks about that, which is weird to me too.
They're not going to ask about Julian Edelman getting arrested for vandalizing a Mercedes Benz. They're not going to care about whether or not Colin Kaepernick gets an opportunity.
Fair point.
Because this what happens when you don't have diverse people in newsrooms or on the field covering these things.
The question I guess I have for you, because I don't know if you care about the Olympics. I don't know if you're a big Olympic watcher.
I am.
What do you think? What do you think about this announcement? How do you think athletes, especially people of color, that maybe were thinking about making a political statement? How do you think they were going to respond to this?
So the IOC is trying to, get athletes to refrain from making a political statement. But the thing is, coming down with, this mandate is political.
Word.
I mean,
Word.
We don't want politics involved. Like,
your delivery on that was excellent.
The Olympics is political. Like,
it's always
literally nature, every country. Like,
the nature of the Olympics is political. So that aside, it's disappointing, but
it's not surprising.
I'm surprised that this didn't come down even earlier. But I will give a nod to, and we were talking about this before we started recording.
Yep.
Rose Robinson, which many of us do not know. This will be about 60 years ago.
60 years.
She refrained from standing for the national anthem at the Pan Am Games. She was a track and field star. And she did not want to push any sort of U.S. propaganda. She was trying to refrain from actually traveling with the U.S. team. She was very much proud to be an athlete, but did not want to. She didn't want to push anything that the U.S. was trying to push through Black athletes. She has been involved in other protests as well. She's no longer with us, but she's definitely somebody that should be researched and written about more. When I first got to Zora, I had Amira Rose Davis write about her. I would also say people need to know Gwen Berry, also a track and field star.
Yep.
She rose her fist at last year's Pan Am Games, was penalized. And so when this news came down, I immediately thought about those two women. And I immediately thought about just the political nature in which we're even having this conversation. There's very little that phases me in sports these days. When you have,
when you had that sign, I knew that's where you're going.
It's like it's political. It's a business. People trying to make sure that they keep their coin straight, and that they don't ruffle feathers. I'm just
exhausted.
Yeah, overall, we're dealing with a very exhausted public in general. Like, every day is a new news story about something, and it's like, I usually see on Twitter whenever I check it, it's like, what are we going to be mad about today?
Yeah.
And then it's like on to the next, like what we were mad about last week is not necessarily what we're going to be mad about today. And so I literally have to take the temperature of I can't get too upset about these things because one, they're not really surprising anymore.
They're not. I think you make a great point about.
It's just another form of oppression.
It is. But I think you make this great point about the Olympics always being political, right? There's always there's a history around politics going and the Olympics being intertwined. You know, the IOC banned South Africa for 21 years because of its politics of apartheid, right? So they have gotten involved in politics, but I do find it interesting to now tell the athletes that they can't be quote unquote political.
Yeah,
right?
Isn't the act of raising your flag at the event political?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, one can say that. The U.S. boycotted the Moscow Games in '80 as political action. It's the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So countries have literally taken responses and pulled their teams out the game. So
I mean, let's not forget about the 1968 Olympics with, Tommy Smith
and John Carlos.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if ever there is symbolism about politics and about, the oppressive nature and conditions that we live in and continuously live in, and how they took a stand. And I mean, they legitimately, were punished for this in multiple ways. It's not until years later where they're looked at as true icons. And I mean, there's still folks who still are very against their actions, but I thought of them too when this news came down. I don't know. It's going to be interesting what does happen. Perhaps there will be no sort of political messages, or maybe athletes get savvy and they show political messages in other ways.
That's what I want.
I'm here for that too. Like maybe the ways we're looking for it. Like obviously when John Carlos and Tommy Smith, they did what they did and they raised their fist, and we saw this Granberry as well too, right? We've seen it in this certain way, and Kaepernick taking knee. Maybe there's other ways that we're not even considering people doing it. I do find it interesting. One thing I'll say before we move on with the politics and sports, this thing is that politics are always around sports, right? Like we've got the national anthem, we've got flyovers over stadiums.
You've got NFL playoff games and national championship where they're introducing the president on the field before the game starts.
So please miss me with all this. There's no politics in the sports stuff. Okay, we have servicemen and women at the games where they're constantly pushing pro-military stuff in your face all the time. So to say that's not political is ridiculous. Go ahead, Christina. I see you want to say something.
There's an injection of politics when it benefits whoever's injecting it, right? Mm-hmm. So all the examples that you just mentioned, sure, they do that because it's benefiting them. It's spotlighting them. There's
a reason he was at the Army-Navy game and not Bethune-Cookman versus Morgan State.
He ain't going there.
You know what I mean?
He's not wanted there. That would be bad for him.
You didn't think I would pull those names out of my ass?
I think he's like at HBCU.
John Carlos was actually quoted in this story that Howard Bryant wrote on the Undefeated when he was talking about this.
Good piece.
John Carlos said, "Everyone wants to be in the Olympics, but why do I have to sacrifice my moral character to do it?"
Yeah. And I think, this is what we saw, even I know it's the Pan American Games and that does not get the look the Olympics got, but I think this is what we saw with Rose Robinson and Granberry. They were not willing to sacrifice their morals for that. And I salute to those two sisters because I think there's something fine. It doesn't take anything away from them being an athlete and competing and how great they are. I understand why they're saying, well, hey, this country doesn't represent the values that I have. And even though I'm competing, it's fair on me to bring that to the world so we can see that. So
I can take this John Carlos quote and apply it to everything.
Everybody
wants to be in media place X, but why do I have to sacrifice my moral character to do it?
One time for your mom, one time. One time for your mom, one time.